Now, changes to the bill which will decide who will pay for the removal of dangerous cladding following the Grenfell Tower tragedy are being debated again today by MPs. The fire safety bill has been going between the Lords and the Commons in what's known as parliamentary ping-pong, when legislation goes back and forth between the two as they reject each other's changes. Peers want to make sure building owners don't pass the cost to leaseholders, but they want grants and loans put into place. MPs, on the other hand, say that is unworkable. It is almost 4 years since the disaster, and some people in similar blocks here in the county of Kent have told us they still feel unsafe in their homes. Alice Swanton, for example, is from Tunbridge Wells and joins us on the phone now. Alice, you live in a small block of flats, don't you? Tell us about your situation.
Yes, I live in a block of flats that typically wouldn't require an ESW1, but unfortunately due to a lack of clarity during the starting days of this issue, banks started asking for one when people tried to get mortgages on the property, and so now we have one. We are sort of stuck with a B2 rating and a building that is unsafe.
You'll have to explain to us what a B2 rating is then.
Okay, so there's from what I know, I think there's four or five ratings, rating A1 to 3 and B1 and B2. And B2 is the worst, stating that the building is at a fire risk. And that is relating directly to the cladding in our case, but could relate to multiple things in the case of different buildings.
And is that certificate how you found out that your building was unsafe?
Yes. We had people who were looking at the property, at my property, and wanted to buy when they checked out with their mortgage advisors, and they went through to our company that runs our building. They were told that the building had unfortunately received a certificate of a B2 rating on an EWS1 form, so therefore, as far as they're concerned, they could not lend on that building.
How did that make you feel?
It's been an emotional roller coaster really for the last year. We're trying to sell because we actually want to adopt a child. So we've been trying to sell so that we can get into a house where we have enough bedrooms to house that child. And realistically, our lives are kind of put on hold and have been for far too long now. And when we're starting to think that we might never get this resolved one way or another.
The government says they've put £1 billion into the Building Safety Fund to remove unsafe cladding. That's a substantial amount, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. Unfortunately, that sort of amount actually only is referable to around about 30% of the claimants. So that is only for people who have cladding that is a certain type, most notably ACM cladding, that needs to be removed. So only those people can claim for that money. I know that our landlords have attempted to claim for some of that money, but so far have been unsuccessful.
Who do you think then should foot the costs of making these properties safe?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, you could argue that one for days. I would say that it would be a mix between government, because the way everything has been quality managed has been somewhat subpar, and a lot of new builds have more problems than just fire safety issues. So some of these regulations need to be looked at. But certainly I feel that we've had building contractors and material providers who have skipped around regulations and provided subpar and poor quality items for buildings. And that's kind of a massive mixture of what has caused this issue.
I can hear the emotion in your voice. This has impacted on your whole life by the sound of it.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, we don't know how long we're going to be in this situation. It could be sort of 2 years, but for some people they're being quoted 10 years plus. And that sort of thing, you know, even without the charges put on top of it, that a lot of these charges are crippling. A lot of people are going through bankruptcies. But just the time on itself, you know, that's change your lifetime. That's reconsider everything that you were considering previously.
That's Alice Swanton from Tunbridge Wells here in Kent. Thank you for being with us, Alice. So Roger Gale is the Conservative MP for North Thanet and joins us now. Roger, can you tell us which way have you voted in this debate today and why?
I've consistently voted in favour of the McPartland and then the St Albans amendments, because while the government has gone a very long way and is committing a large sum of money to rectify matters in respect of very high-rise buildings, there is a whole raft of properties that's left outside the net. And as a consequence, a large number of very worried people who potentially are facing huge bills that they couldn't possibly begin to pay. But what we're all saying is that the responsibility for these matters has to lie with the people responsible, which is the developers, the builders, the people who were originally responsible for using the wrong materials or for not constructing the building in a way that it should have been constructed.
Why do you think it's important to protect leaseholders from excessive remedial costs?
Because if you don't do so, you're entering into a huge realm of injustice. These leaseholders couldn't possibly afford to carry out the necessary remedial works, which is what they are, to the properties that they are living in and they bought in good faith. It is not their responsibility, it's not their fault. It is, if anybody's fault, and I think it is the fault of the people who were responsible for constructing the properties and cladding them in the first place, in the case of the cladding. So I'm afraid they have to bear the responsibility. And we are getting now closer to, I think, I hope, a government concession. It'll go back to the House of Lords tomorrow. It may, well, possibly even tonight. It may well come back to the Commons tomorrow. I shall vote exactly the same way tomorrow. But I'm hoping that between now and then, negotiations will take place and a sensible government amendment, because I'm absolutely satisfied that the St Albans amendment is right-headed, but probably not well drafted in terms of law. So what we need is a well-drafted amendment put forward by the government that does the job that we all want done.
How much of an issue is this in your constituency, Roger?
Not huge, but that isn't the point. There are buildings in my constituency that fall into this net. I've had a very few communications from constituents. But this is a national issue, and it's one that has to be addressed. We're a national parliament. We're making national law. We have to make provision to protect all of those people who deserve and ought to have proper protection from unreasonable charges. And that's what we're doing.
And as we heard earlier from Alice, it can have a huge impact on people's lives, can't it?
Well, of course it can. Absolutely it can. At all sorts of levels. First of all, of course, the buildings have to be made safe. We have to know that the buildings that people are living in are fit for purpose. And second, we also have to know that people are not going to spend the rest of their lives worrying about vast debts that they couldn't possibly afford to repay.
That's Sir Roger Gale, the Conservative MP for North Thanet. Thank you for being with us. In a statement, the Fire Minister, Lord Greenhorse, said the Fire Safety Bill clarifies that building owners and managers for residential buildings must assess the fire safety risk of cladding and flat entrance doors. Meanwhile, in response to Alice, a government spokesperson told us we want to see all homes made safer as quickly as possible, and backed by our £1.6 billion funding, we're making good progress on remediating unsafe homes.